As we enter the upcoming weekend, we are monitoring 3 severe weather patterns across the United States that could have a major impact on your weekend plans. Plus, our first major snowstorm is in the cards in our forecast here at the Weather Farm. So let's dive right into our details. We are watching an area associated with Hurricane Priscilla as it continues to spill moisture into the southwest. This is going to provide heavy amounts of rain across the Four Corners region for the upcoming weekend. Back out along the East Coast, we are watching an area of disturbed weather that's going to combine with a low pressure that will move out of the Great Lakes, and together they will form an East Coast storm. Not a tropical system in nature, but definitely one that will bring high winds and heavy amounts of rain to the East Coast. And out across the west, we are watching a trough that is beginning to move onshore to the Pacific Northwest. That's going to continue to move through the Rockies over the upcoming weekend and provide that first chance of significant snowfall for the upper plains into the provinces of Canada. So let's just jump right into our forecast. Here's where we look Friday evening. We're watching that area of disturbed weather off the southeast coast, bringing heavy rains to Georgia and South Carolina. College football games and some high school football games might be impacted by this weather. We're continuing to watch that moisture stream up through Arizona into Utah in the southwest, associated with that tropical system. And in the Pacific Northwest, we're watching the first round of showers beginning to move onto the Washington and Oregon coast. That will continue to move onshore over the weekend. And by the time we get to Saturday afternoon, that low pressure is moved well inland. And we're starting to watch now the cooler air across British Columbia and Alberta start to make its way down into the lower 48. Those blue lines indicate where snow is likely because the height contours are less than 540 decameters. But we're continuing to now see that moisture from the tropics in the eastern Pacific move into the Four Corners region, this time impacting more of eastern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico. And now we have a fully formed low off the coast of South Carolina that is spreading heavy rains up through Virginia as it continues to make its way through the east coast. But look across the Great Plains here and the northern plains. Look at how tight these pressure lines are. This is an indication of the power that this area of low pressure is producing, as it is producing strong amounts of winds across the central plains into Canada as this system continues to wrap itself up and pull down that cooler air. And this is going to be the mechanism that's going to create that heavy amount of snow for the Canadian provinces this coming weekend. And this is really being driven by our jet stream. We have a ridge that is building across the central plains. Here comes that moisture from the southwest. There goes that area of low pressure through the Great Lakes as it meets the one going up the east coast. And it's going to form into a formidable storm across the east coast as we go Sunday into Monday before eventually turning out to sea by the middle of next week. But out across the west coast, we're watching that trough beginning to dig in. And out ahead of it, southwesterly winds bringing strong warm air into the central plains. And here's that low pressure. As it continues to eject to the northeast, we're going to see the trough become negatively tilted, an indication that that low pressure is strengthening here with those strong winds. And it's going to move up through Manitoba, right over Lake Winnipeg, towards Hudson Bay by the time we get to the middle of the week. But then we have yet another system diving into the Pacific Northwest and California, and that's going to create our next storm as we get to the middle and late parts of next week. So a lot is going on here in the atmosphere. We look at our 500 millibar chart just as another point of reference to confirm those things we're seeing at the jet stream level. There's that ridge. Here's that trough digging in, and we see those southwesterly winds, again, producing strong winds across the plains and a low pressure system ejecting up through Manitoba. The one off the east coast is continuing to move off and out to sea, and there's that next system beginning to dive in. By the time we get to Sunday, that low pressure, which was over Montana and Wyoming on our Saturday, has now deepened into a 987 millibar low as it continues to bring cold air on the backside, which will turn that precipitation over to snow across parts of Saskatchewan into Manitoba. But look at these height contour lines out ahead of that low. We see a lot of red lines. This is an indication that around that counterclockwise rotation, we're pumping a lot of warm air into the front half of the system while we're pulling deep, cool air behind the system. So out ahead of it, anywhere to the east and to the southeast of that low pressure track, you're going to primarily be in the warm sector of this storm. It is in that northwest quadrant of the storm where we expect to see the heaviest amounts of snow as we go through the upcoming weekend. So as I mentioned, Friday we're watching this area of disturbed weather across the southeast. We're also watching moisture through the Four Corners region. But here comes that system where winter storm watches have already been hoisted across parts of Montana. We're going to watch that low continue to move off to the northeast Saturday into Sunday, bringing heavy amounts of snow on the backside. Out ahead of it, heavy amounts of rain. We're going to continue to watch that system move up the east coast Monday into Tuesday before eventually moving out towards sea. And here comes our next system diving into California and the southwest. By the time we get to Tuesday or Wednesday, we could even be talking snowfall in Nevada and Utah, especially those higher elevations with this second system. And it's going to continue that same path moving to the northeast through the central plains by the time we get to the middle of next week. In terms of our temperatures for our Saturday, it's going to be cool across the northeast, 50s and 60s, warm across the south with 90s in Texas, 80s stretching as far north as central Nebraska, 90s out in the south. But we're going to watch this temperature gradient because where we are here in Montana, temperatures in the 60s and 70s for our Saturday. By the time we get to our Sunday, those temperatures are still relatively warm as we're waiting for that cool air to filter in from British Columbia and Alberta into the system. So Sunday's still going to be a warm day across most of the northern plains and to Montana. But it's not until we get to our Monday that we start to see that cooler air filtering in. Highs here only in the 40s and low 50s, but just to the north, through southern Saskatchewan into northwestern Manitoba, highs will be in the 30s. Down across the lower 48, again, warm across the southern tier, 80s and 90s. Still very cool in the northeast where you're going to have that rainfall and that added cloud cover that's going to keep your temperatures in the 50s and 60s for your Monday. 60s and 70s through the Ohio Valley. In the Pacific Northwest, we're remaining cool as well with temperatures in the 60s for your afternoon highs. And the latest drought monitor issued for the United States shows much of the eastern half of the United States under moderate or severe drought. We do have areas of extreme drought across far northern New England, where especially parts of Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, where you're getting close to that peak season for your fall foliage, and that drought is definitely playing an impact on the colors of your trees in that area. We're also seeing some areas of extreme drought across the lower Great Lakes into the southern states, and especially out west. We are going to watch for those rains that are moving into the Four Corners region to help alleviate that drought somewhat, but the problem is going to be the flash flooding across that area. When we look at the amount of rainfall that is expected over the United States over the next 6 days, we see that the highest concentration is going to be in the southwest and through California, as well as through the northern Rockies into southern Canada, and then along the east coast. Looking here at the Four Corners region, by Thursday morning, we could see areas of 2 to 3 inches across southern and central Arizona. Even across far southern New Mexico, you could see 1 to 2 inches, but heavy amounts of rain for southwestern Colorado. Places could see 4, 6, up to 8 inches of rainfall. And this is going to provide flash flooding across this area because this is not common rainfall amounts in such a short period of time for this area. So if you see water, don't drown, turn around, and be aware of weather watches and warnings that may be issued for your local communities in respect to flash flooding that is quite possible over the next 6 days. Looking across the east coast, we're going to see the heaviest amounts of rain across the Carolinas, where we could see 1 to 2 inches, possibly as much as 4 inches along the coast, stretching their way even up to the outer banks of North Carolina. But as we make our way up to the north, the heaviest amounts will be about 1 to 3 inches, heavier closer to the coast that you are. As that system moves up, it will eventually turn out to sea. And so Maine, we're really not expecting you to be impacted significantly, except for those far southern reaches where you may have rainfall up an inch over the next 6 days. And looking at the northern Rockies, here we have Montana, we have Wyoming and Idaho. We're going to see that swath through southeastern Idaho, northwestern Wyoming, through most of eastern and central Montana into Canada, where we could see 1 to 2 inches of rain over the next 6 days. Far northwestern North Dakota, you could be in the bullseye for as much as 4 inches of rain by Thursday. And in terms of snowfall, we're really going to see it start to pile up here across the mountainous regions of Montana into northwestern Wyoming. But the main storm that we are going to watch is also here across northeastern Montana into far extremes of North Dakota into southern Saskatchewan and Manitoba, where we could see snowfall up to 8 to 10 inches of snow by the time we get to our Thursday morning. And as we move into Canada, now this map is translated into centimeters. So as we move from southern Saskatchewan, we could see snowfall amounts up to 30 centimeters, about a foot of snow. But as we make our way through Alberta, we're going to stay, most of the heavy snow is going to stay north of Lake Winnipeg, where we could see amounts 40 to 60 centimeters of snow, which could put the equivalent of 15 to 8 inches of snow across this area. And that's going to extend as we make our way towards Hudson Bay, places like Port Nelson. You're going to be just on the fringe of that heavy snowfall. But this snowfall is going to fall in a very compact region. So there's going to be a sharp snowfall gradient north and south of the system. So places to the north of, in northern Alberta, like Tuduli Lake, you could be very low on the snowfall totals. So we're going to continue to monitor this snowfall threat through central Alberta, and this snowfall is going to stick around for a little while, and we're going to see that impact on temperatures as we jump into our future forecast maps a little bit later. So after we see this storm exit, we watch for the second storm to start to form in that same area, and it could bring a second round of snow to Montana and North Dakota as we approach next weekend. But by the time we get to next Friday, we're going to watch for some severe weather through the Great Lakes in the Ohio Valley, but then the weather's going to calm down for a couple of days before we watch for that next system. And it is that system that is moving onto the coast by the time we get towards October 20th that's going to change our weather pattern across the United States as we enter the last few days of October. But as I mentioned, as we see that snowfall going through Saskatchewan into Manitoba, you can clearly see the coldest temperatures are going to be where that snowpack is the deepest. We could see high temperatures in the 20s and 30s from southern Saskatchewan through central Manitoba, with highs in the 30s. Across the northern tier, 50s and 60s. More seasonal weather elsewhere across the United States, maybe the exception being in the Northeast, where on Tuesday you're still going to have the remnants of that heavy amount of rain and that cloud cover. And as we go into our Wednesday, again, watching across southern Canada, you see where that snowpack is the greatest, even in parts of Montana and Wyoming. In those higher elevations, temperatures there will be kept down in the 30s and 40s. And we're seeing a little jab of cooler air across the Dakotas, but it's mainly seasonal temperatures for most of the United States. We start to see a little bulge in warm air out ahead of that next system as it's going to continue to move out of the Rockies. By Thursday and Friday of next week, we could be watching for another round of snowfall for Montana and North Dakota, while out ahead of it as we bring those warmer southerly winds, temperatures in the lower Ohio Valley and these valleys could rise into the low 80s. And speaking of temperatures, the Climate Prediction Center has issued its latest 8 to 14 day outlook. It has much of the Northeast with below normal temperatures during the time period October 7th through the 23rd, as well as Southern California and the Southwest. Most of the Central Plains, South Central Plains, and along the Gulf Coast into Florida, you're expected to be above normal for your temperatures. And in terms of precipitation, where we see those troughs digging into the west and then ejecting out through the Rockies, through the northern plains, that's where we're going to see the greatest chance of above normal precipitation during this time period. Unfortunately, across the southeast, you're going to go into a more drier pattern as we close out the month of October. And the rest of the country from Texas through Indiana up through the northeast, you have equal chances of above or below precipitation during this time period. Before we leave the forecast today, I do want to touch quickly on the tropics. We continue to watch Tropical Storm Jerry as it continues to move north of the Leeward Islands. It is going to take a more northerly track and eventually turn out towards the east. We do have subtropical system Karen in the far North Atlantic. It's expected to weaken over the next 24 to 48 hours. It is not tropical in nature. When we look at the path for Jerry over the next 48 hours, the National Hurricane Center has revised down its official forecast. Now, we did talk about this in our last video, that we didn't think that Jerry would strengthen to a hurricane. And now the National Hurricane Center is agreeing with that thinking as they keep the system mainly a tropical storm as it makes its way north towards Bermuda. But it will eventually make that right-hand turn by late in the weekend, early next week. And then it'll just kind of wander out here in the central Atlantic until the next trough continues to move it out further away from Bermuda. We don't expect a direct hit to Bermuda at this time, but Bermuda will be impacted by some strong winds and some heavy seas. So this is mainly going to be an impactful storm for those shipping routes and those boats out in the central Atlantic. Well, we thank you for joining us here on your Friday. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. Go ahead and click that like button, hit that bell notification icon so you're notified when we have the latest video. Stay safe. And again, if you're impacted by heavy rains or if you're impacted by that snow, we'd love to see pictures of what's going on in your backyard. Go ahead and drop those down in the comment section, and we will hope to see you again on our next video next week. Have a great day.